After one long night over two movies, the third rec shakes things up by dropping the found footage format and relocating to a wedding reception. Rec Genesis is such a massive change for the franchise that it's proven divisive amongst fans. So let's see where we land. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim. As a horror movie podcast, we get together, we talk about horror movie. We are recording ahead right now. Tim's about to leave for his second baby. So he'll be gone for, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, something like that. But we'll have most of that covered with banked episodes. And what a better time, and we've done this a few times already as we're banking these episodes, but to get back and do an entry in a franchise that we've not hit in a little while that we started. So today we're going to look at Rec 3 Genesis. So we did Rec 1. I want to say that was like an October movie in like 2018 or 2019. It was like
sounds about right. Yeah.
And then we did Rec 2 when we were prepping for your first baby. We were doing like a zombie month, and we did Rec 2 then. So we're here again with Rec 3. So you have to have a third kid so we can do the fourth one at some point. But
oh sure.
We're here for Rec 3 Genesis, which is, it sounds like it's a prequel from the title, but it's actually not. The word Genesis doesn't actually refer to the start of the zombie virus. It's just it's got a biblical connotation that it gets to in the story. But
connotation.
It's an interesting pivot for the franchise because it starts in found footage, but then changes to traditional filmmaking after about 20 minutes. Notably, the title screen doesn't appear until it makes that switch. So it's only an 80-minute movie. So as far as percentages of the movie go before the title card appears, this one, not counting movies that leave it to the end, because obviously they're at the end. But for movies that do it after a little scene and then give you the title, this is probably the furthest into a movie I've seen a title appear that I can think of. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been watching movies my whole life, and I've crunched the numbers, and I find the perfect time for a title to appear is exactly 7 minutes and 49 seconds into the motion picture.
Even that feels a little late, but maybe it isn't. Maybe there's a lot of movies that have like a big opening scene that takes a few minutes, and
well, I'm including at least one trailer.
You're including the trailer in this.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, as always, we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers. There may be some spoilers for the first two. I don't think they'll come up that much, to be honest, before we get to spoilers, but just in case, I'll give you a soft warning for those. But once again, it's a zombie movie set at a wedding, and that's basically the premise. We'll get into specifics later. But there's a few little connections to the other movies to sort of, make it feel like it's in the same universe, but otherwise it's not following characters from the previous two films. It's not in the same apartment building that both 1 and 2 were set in. So it does feel like a pivot point in many ways from those first two. So yeah, I mean, we've both seen this before. I'm right in saying, right?
Yeah. I watched it before. I think the fourth one, I don't know if I've seen, but I know I've seen this one.
Yeah.
I think it was on Netflix for a while, because I think I just kind of randomly put it on one day. Yeah,
I saw the first one when it became available on like at the time it was probably DVD. Was it? No, it was Blu-ray. Because it was 2009. It was Blu-ray. And then the second one I actually got to see in the theater, which was a fun time. It was kind of cool to see, like,
I think I remember you talking about that. Yeah,
it's not often, at least at the time, it was kind of a new thing to get to see like a sort of an indie horror foreign movie in the theater. But times were changing, I guess, and I got the opportunity. This one, I think it was back to just seeing on Blu-ray, and I think part of that is because it didn't get a theatrical release in the UK. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I don't feel like it did. So I think I just blind bought the Blu-ray and watched it that way. So yeah, we'll get into it. I have seen the fourth one. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but that's for another day. So we'll get to that. But I guess the question that I have to ask to start this off, to get the ball rolling, to break the ice, as one might say, Tim.
Uh-huh.
What did you think of Wreck Genesis?
Ooh, you saucy little man. Ooh. I was taken back by that question. Yeah, I
Just because I put a dramatic pause in, Tim, doesn't mean you have to put in 5 in your first sentence.
I actually like this one quite a bit. It's not it doesn't feel as like big or important or as different as like the first one, or I mean maybe even a little bit I guess to the second one as well, but to me it's just kind of like dumb fun, like like the first one is just like a hands down just a really cool, like I don't know, it feels different, it felt like new, and I don't know, maybe like more serious and cool, and just doing a lot of really like neat, interesting ideas. I wouldn't say you necessarily like get that in this movie, but I don't know, I just find it to be kind of a fun time. I find the characters are pretty enjoyable. The setting is fun, it's a little different. I think the first time I watched it, I was like a little like, how dare they switch like formats, like a third into the movie or whatever, when they go from found footage to not or whatever. But watching it now, I don't really care. It's like, oh yeah, it's fine, whatever.
Do you think that's just because you're more tired of found footage?
That's probably it. I feel like at the time it was like, oh my god, like Rec is like the sacred found footage genre, and now I'm just like, who cares? You can do whatever you want, like as long as it's entertaining. Like I don't really give a shit. And also just knowing it's coming, it's not as jarring. But I don't know, there's some pretty fun kills, and I think it's mostly just I think a big part of it is that I find the two leads to be pretty charming. I think especially the bride, I quite liked her character and her journey, and she gets like some pretty badass moments. And yeah, so that's like I hope it doesn't sound reductive when I say like, oh yeah, it's not like groundbreaking or like this awesome new cult sensation that the first one was, but it doesn't always have to be. Sometimes a sequel, you just want to have some dumb fun. And I think that's what you get here. I think there's maybe a few times here and there where it might look a little cheap or whatever, but you kind of forgive it for just for just not worrying too much about it and just having a fun dumb time.
Yeah, it's funny, the switch to live, or not live action, it was always live action, but the switch to regular movie making is kind of weird in the sense that it's called Rec, and the reason why it's called Rec is because it was found footage. Yeah. But I do appreciate the choice in the sense that the creators went, you know what, we've done what we could with found footage. The first one's a great movie, the second one surprisingly played with the format and sort of like experimented with it a bit more and did some different things with it, so it felt fresh still. And I appreciate they got into the third one, and although admittedly only one of the two directors came back, because the first two were co-directed by Paco Plaza and another dude, whereas in this one it's just Paco Plaza. But I do appreciate the choice, like, you know what, I've done all I can with the found footage, let's just switch to regular movie. We'll have a little bit at the start and we'll make it more of a transition. That being said, I don't like this movie all that much after this viewing. I think I was closer to you before. Watching it this time, I kind of felt like, there's a couple of cool moments with the bride and a chainsaw in particular, but it feels a little bit rushed. And I think the big thing for me is that it kind of tries to play the emotional beats a lot in this one, where because so much of the movies, like the bride and groom are separated and they're trying to find each other amidst all the zombie chaos, and every time it tried to play the emotion where one of them was worried the other one was dead, or the touching reunion moments, or it all kind of felt like all this is hinging on the first 20 minutes, which was like all the photographs of them being happy and a couple of snippets of the wedding speech and dancing at the wedding, and I'm just like, I don't think you earned me caring about these two and their, romantic pairing all that much. So a lot of that stuff came off as kind of forced and cheesy to me. I did it as a couple of cool gory moments, but there's also a lot of silly stuff in this. Like, at
it's definitely a bit more comedic than the previous ones.
Like at one point, the groom dresses in like a suit of armor that he finds lying around. There's a character dressed as a sponge. Joe Sponge, not Bob, because there was a copyright issue.
Which, I think, admittedly though, I thought those were pretty funny gags.
I think the first time I watched it, I remember thinking that I wasn't into the early parts of the movie all that much, but once it switched, and particularly once it got to the second half where we were getting more interesting chaos and like zombie scenes, I think I sort of get into just kind of the silly fun of it. I think this time I was kind of noticing just how little it did a job of making me care about anything, and I think especially when you compare it to the first two, which do a really good job of just feeling very frantic, and everyone's like, there's not a lot, at least I don't remember a lot of cheesy stuff in the first two where someone's getting emotional about losing someone or anything like that. Everyone's just really frantic and scared. And the moments that sort of land are the moments of panic when someone's quietly trying to hide or something like that, where he's like, okay, you know what, I buy this because the entire movie's built me up to this point where they've been terrified and running for their lives. Whereas this one is trying to be a bit more old school, and that it's trying to do like characters try to get back to each other and making dramatic choices because they love each other. And I don't think I quite ever feel it in the movie. I don't think it's like terrible, and I don't think it's a hard watch. I mean, it's 80 minutes. It's like super quick. But maybe almost to its detriment, where it feels like it could have done a little bit more to make me care about the characters and perhaps give me more of a sense of geography of this location they're at, which is like, there's obviously a church and there's like a big sort of banquet hall, and I don't know if they're in maybe like some kind of center or maybe at the bottom of a hotel or whatever it is, but I was wondering like, there could maybe be more fun here with like understanding how far away they are from each other, and like, what are the obstacles and rooms to get through to get to the other characters and things like that. I don't know if the movie ever really made me feel like I understood the geography of it, so I didn't get into kind of that side of it. It kind of felt like just the characters would be separate until the movie decided that conveniently this was when they wouldn't be separate anymore to me. But I mean, I may be being a little bit harsh, but I think it's not really that controversial as I mean to say that it's definitely a fairly big step down from the first two, because I think the second one is it holds surprisingly well compared to the first one. The first one is the better movie, but the second one gets pretty close. It's a really good second movie. I think this one feels more like, this is just a sequel that exists to be a sequel. Whereas the second one felt like it actually continued the story that was set up in the first one. This one just feels like, it almost feels like a spin-off. It's just it's somewhere else in the city when the zombie outbreak's happening. And
it's like completely different location, completely different characters.
And admittedly, I don't remember the fourth one being that good, to be honest, but the fourth one does continue the main story, so it does make this one feel even more like
detached.
Detached. It feels more like out of left field and just kind of like here for the sake of it. It almost makes me think that it'd have been worth just making a zombie movie, but I guess obviously calling it Rec 3 like helps it out financially, and
sure.
So I get why, but it just kind of feels like you could have just done a different zombie movie. There's basically two small connections. Okay, one small and one big. I'll say one big because how the zombies operate and function and why they're zombies is kind of a big connection. But other than that, there's just a kind of a reference as to where, like, why the virus is here. Like, there's a reference to a dog, like a kennel, which is like something that was brought up in the first movie. So, and that's basically that. That's your tether. I guess I assume this is taking place on the same night as Rec 1.
Probably.
I think so. Maybe the next night, push. But I think it's the same night, because you even see like on the news in the background at one point that there's chaos in the city, which I presume is the apartment building and all the emergency services go in there and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I guess I would sum up by saying I'm lukewarm. Like I think it's kind of a middling film with a few fun moments. Don't get me wrong. There's a couple of fun chainsaw bits and whatnot, but other than that, the characters kind of fell flat for me. So.
They kind of worked for me. I thought maybe I thought they were like kind of charming enough, and then again, like I understand what you're saying, like how maybe there's not like a ton of build up, but also it's like, I mean, we're at the wedding, like, you know, I can assume that they, you know, are pretty you know, pretty in love. And I don't know, I feel like, you know, if you ever been to a wedding, like it does kind of feel like, you know, like emotions and stuff are heightened. So I think that's an interesting choice to have it set, and I don't know, it gives me like enough, you know, to kind of root for the couple. I mean, I agree though. It's like it is a big step down from the other two movies. Like, you know, because again, it's not like those movies do feel like, oh, we're doing something really cool and different, and
That feels
there's like
more
a level of technique there.
yeah, this feels more generic though, right? Because like the first two feel like this fresh new way to do a zombie movie.
Yeah.
This movie, other than a couple of little plot points, just feels like, oh, this is just a regular zombie movie with some hijinks in it.
Yeah, but I think I don't know, for me there was enough stuff there, and that it moved quickly enough that like I don't know, I thought it was a pretty good watch. I would say I enjoyed it. Again, not, you know, not as good as the originals, and like I'm not saying it's like, oh my god, it's an amazing movie, but you know, definitely like I've seen worse. And yeah, I'd say it's probably I guess only my second time watching it, but like you know, it's definitely something I would watch again. I wouldn't mind.
I mean, it wasn't easy to watch. I can't deny that. But, but yeah, so okay. Yeah. All the characters that aren't the bride and the groom are kind of just there. Some of them, you know, they get introduced and they feel like they're going to be bigger characters, but you know, obviously characters are dying left and right. They get killed off quite quickly. Some of them, surprisingly so, in a few cases where it kind of feel like there was a couple where I was like, yeah, I feel like you could have done more with that character before you offed them. They kind of went for the surprise deaths, maybe too frequently, I suppose. But that's a relative minor quibble, I suppose. I mean, other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say before we get into the meat of the movie. Yeah, I mean, you know, gore's good. I would say it's constant, but whenever you do get some, there's a couple of key moments, especially that stick out.
Yeah.
But yeah. Right. Well, I guess we'll go. I guess we'll give the spoiler warning and get into it, because I don't know how much else we can really talk about without it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the first 20 minutes of Rec 3. So we're in spoilers now, just if I didn't make that clear. We basically get home footage of, like, you know, so there's a young guy, I think his name's Adrian, who's filming the wedding on his little camcorder, and then we get introduced to an actual videographer who's there with a steady cam. Who that's, you know, Adrian's really impressed by. He's like, whoa, that's like a proper HD camera and all that, blah blah blah. And it kind of sets up a kind of like a, I won't even say a friendship, just like a friendly acquaintance between the two of them. Early on. Actually, just a bit of personal note here is that I noticed the camera that this guy was using was the camera I used in the first year of university. So cool. It gave me a chuckle, and the timeline kind of adds up, because this came out in 2012, and I'd have been using that in 2011 to 2012. So yeah, so it's exactly the sort of camera that someone at this sort of level of professional video making would be using.
Yeah, I really like this character, and it does feel like a little bit of a wasted opportunity that he doesn't stick around very long. Oh,
he goes very quickly, once the stuff starts. So the movie kind of cuts between like the different cameras. If it even opens with like a photographic montage of the married couple, it's almost as if this is the final edited wedding video with like a song playing and all the photos. But of course, the video never gets finished because everyone's going to die. So they're cheating a little bit with that, but I get what they're going for. So it's fine. I get it. But
yeah. I mean that's a pet peeve I've had in like a lot of found footage movies. Like a lot of times, like they'll switch between different types of cameras or footage, which is totally fine. But then it does kind of, you do lose a little bit of the mystique of just being like, oh, this is just like a like piece of footage or film that you just randomly find, you know.
I mean, sometimes they'll give you a little text at the start saying that this footage was found and assembled by an editor or something like that to
right,
explain it. It doesn't do it here, obviously, and it doesn't do it and it wouldn't make sense here because you assume that the apocalypse happens, after this movie, and that's, who's going to be around to edit this damn thing exactly?
Yeah.
But we're introduced to some minor characters here. We're introduced to, I think his name's Rafa, who's this guy who's friends with the groom who just cares if this girl Natalie's going to come to the wedding. We're introduced to the uncle who's been bit by a dog. So that's kind of, you're like, oh, that's how we're going to have a zombie virus. Very good. I think that's probably why I think the first 20 minutes is a little on the tedious side, is that it is mostly just these snippets of like wedding home footage, which is, some speeches being made, but a little bit of the ceremony, some dances out in the dance floor.
Dance floor.
I was shut up. But it's just all kind of these snippets, to the point where I'm like, why is it only these snippets? Like, if you're filming this for the purpose of it being a wedding video, it's kind of weird that there's just these little snippets of like the middle of a speech and a little snippet of the ceremony here or whatever. That's
true.
Like, the editor went a bit snip happy if he's cutting out a lot of the like when they do their first dance, the first dance as a married couple. Like, it's shot from behind and you can't see their faces, and I'm like, this feels like an odd choice to shoot from this angle. I mean, just
Yeah.
Am I being too nitpicky here, Tim? Is this just all?
No, that's fine. I mean, I think the way I took it is that most of that stuff is being done by like the younger kid who is just kind of like, he's not a professional. He's just kind of like, oh, film whatever, and then like, like let's say if everything went according to plan and they had a nice, there were no zombies and they just had a nice wedding video afterwards, you would think the majority is probably being done by the professional guy who's probably getting like the better angles and stuff. And
yeah, the Steadicam guy's probably getting the good angles. Yeah, you're probably right. It is kind of funny though, because it switches to that camera and it is almost like a movie camera because it is the super smooth shot. In fact, I think this is the first one in this franchise that's shot in 2:3:5:1 as well. It's wider, basically, Tim.
Gotcha.
It's wider like most movies are today. But anyway, yeah. So it keeps this style until the uncle like falls off the balcony into the dance floor and bites someone, and then very quickly chaos happens and they all run for cover. And we end up with the groom and a few characters in the kitchen with the door barricaded. And the groom grabs the kid's camera and smashes it. And that's when we get the title screen. And then we switch to traditional movie. And from then on, it is just a normal movie. So, I don't know. Anything else you want to add about this first 20 minutes?
No, it's again, I didn't really mind it. It mostly worked for me. Like I didn't really find it too tedious, just because again, I thought the characters were pretty endearing for the most part, and it moves quickly, so it's not like super boring or anything. One thing that I do think is kind of interesting is that they do get away from the found footage format, but I do feel like there's so many movies where it's like, oh, come on, why do they have like a camera in the first place? Why are they filming this? Why are they continuing to film this? This is like a funny example because I feel like I wouldn't have had those questions in this movie. Like, yeah, obviously, if he was filming throughout, it'd be like a little weird, but you can also say like, oh yeah, I mean, it's a crazy things going on that he wants to capture it. And like, especially if he is this kind of like wannabe filmmaker or something, like, this is like a huge thing that dropped in his lap that he could make like a documentary out of or whatever. So it actually would like, unlike some movies, like you question it. Like actually, I wouldn't question it if they kept doing it in this one. I
probably would have past a certain point, but now you're mentioning it, it did kind of feel like they were setting up a reason why this kid was going to keep filming at the start.
Yeah.
When he was like so impressed with the other camera. Yeah,
maybe that's like part of the joke though, like you said, like he like smashes the camera and then it's like,
well, I mean, the line of dialogue right before is like, why are you still filming? He's like, oh, I have to film, people have got a right to see this. It was almost like the exact dialogue you get in a found footage movie from the camera guy explaining why they has to keep filming. And then the groom smashes it. It almost felt like a breaking the fourth wall moment of being it was almost like the movie was making fun of its previous movies and the rest of the genre for all the bullshit reasons that get brought up for why the guy keeps filming. Although, to be fair, I think Rec 1 is the best. It's like they're filming a news story, and that's the whole point of their job. Like, this is what they would be doing in the situation. It was the one that I've had the least problem with out of any found footage movie, because it just felt natural. Yeah, sure. This is a news camera guy and a reporter. Of course they're going to keep filming, because this is their job, and they've literally landed on the story of the century by being in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. So that made sense to me. Whereas the guy filming the wedding, I feel like after his life's in danger, I'd be like, F this.
At some point you're gonna drop it so you can run faster or grab a weapon or something.
Yeah, especially if the guy with the Steadicam, I mean, come on, that's a big rig that he's lugging around. And sadly, because he's like a chubbier guy, when they decide to go through a vent, he's like, oh, I can't fit through that, you just go without me. And then you don't see him again, and then until later in the movie when the groom's going back through the area, he's in the kitchen with his wrists slashed, and it's like, this is a really sad, depressing little ending for this character who didn't really have a whole lot.
You don't see a lot of them, but he was pretty likable. I feel like it should have gotten something a little more, at least give him some badass, he dies, blocking off all these zombies while everyone escapes or something like that. I did find it really frustrating that they're trying to go through this grate in the floor, and they drop the one guy drops his screwdriver or whatever or little jackknife thing they were using to unscrew it, and then they instantly give up on that plan. I was like, I don't know, you can't find anything else.
It's a kitchen. There's a lot of knives and stuff you could probably use to
That still seemed that's that was the better plan and stuff that you could have kept trying.
Because I think here there's there's the videographer, the Steadicam guys I've been calling him. There's the character who we find out is a royalty inspector.
Oh yeah,
he goes to the wedding to note down all the songs that are played so that the royalties can be paid. Now maybe it's different.
That can't be a real thing.
Well, maybe it's different in Spain. I know in the UK the way it works is that if you're a public business of some kind, so this goes for restaurants, it goes for stores if they want to play music in their stores, is there's just a general license you pay yearly to play music, and that's it. There's no, you don't specifically pay to every artist you're putting on the so it's something that restaurants have to pay. It's also why at some stores you'll notice you'll have a CD that's all covers. It's because it gets them around having to pay for the license to use the music, or to pay for, it gets them around having to pay for the license to use proper music. So they have a local band do some covers and just play it in the store. I've seen that in a few places, but by and large it's it's one license you pay yearly and you can play music. And I assume that would go for, particularly for a hall that's rented out for weddings and stuff like that. You would assume maybe it's a different type of license for that type of event because it's specifically parties with a DJ or whatever, but you would assume there would just be a license that they pay to do that, and that would be it. Maybe Spain's different. Maybe Spain's no, you need to pay for every single track. This is,
I don't know, that seems insane to me. If you own the tracks, if you when we had our wedding, we just basically put a bunch of different songs on an old iPod or iPhone or something, and just played the track list off that. But but it's all stuff that we own and we bought. We should have the freedom to play it whenever we want.
But the law doesn't see it that way, Tim, because I think if you're over a certain amount of people, it counts as a public not performance, but there's an audience for it. It's the same reason why you're technically not supposed to show a DVD or a Blu-ray to a classroom, because that's too many people, and that counts as a public showing of it. Even though schools do it anyway, don't get me wrong. But if you ever read that text at the start of some DVDs and stuff, it does specifically say cannot be shown in prisons, schools, something, a few other ones.
That's so dumb.
Yeah. So no, it counts as a performance. It's the radio has to pay to use this song, so you should have to pay to play it to a large group of people. Is kind of the attitude. But That's the sort of thing that the place where you had your wedding would have been covered for, not the people in the wedding themselves.
Sure.
That's why you go there. And if you just do your own thing in some shack somewhere, then the chances of anyone, like, you know, phoning the royalty police and saying, hey, so and so is playing music there, and I don't think they've paid for a music license. So again, I only know what the rule is in the UK. I assume it's similar in the US. I assume it's just a license you pay per year.
I mean, I honestly, I've never heard of it, but I mean, I'm not like organizing events like this, so
yeah, obviously, yeah.
That does seem pretty crazy to me, but I wouldn't be surprised. You know, people, companies like money.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just the idea though to like pay someone to go and like, yeah, because like presumably like, yeah, if they go and you know this place doesn't have the license and stuff, like I don't know, how much do they really owe?
Move that damn cat, he keeps bumping into the mic too.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me just throw my beloved cat across the room.
I throw my beloved cats across the room all the time.
He has as much a right to be here as we do. He's part of the podcast.
Oh, let's see. What's Damien's thoughts on Rec 3?
She's into it.
Anyway, so yeah, we have these characters, and then the young kid, of course, who was filming. And none of them last very long. Like, obviously, the Steadicam guy stays behind and presumably dies, and we see later that he's died. The other two come with the groom, but they get killed pretty quick. I don't even remember how both of them died, to be honest. They're kind of sneaking around, and
the royalties guy, I remember they're like out in the parking lot, and he's the one try to go in a car.
Yeah, he's the one that dies at the car. You're right, because they're trying to, like, he pulls off a woman who almost bites the main groom, and then he ends up getting bit. You're right. And then the groom and the young guy end up in a church with some survivors who are kind of like hiding out. And it turns out that the zombies can't go in the church, which is an interesting mechanic, but it does kind of line up with where, you know, from the first two movies, like where the zombie virus came from. It came from this possessed girl, so it's like a demonic zombie virus. So that makes some sense.
Yeah.
But
if anything, they probably could have played with that stuff a little bit more.
They could have done, yeah. Yeah. Although at one point they said they don't like holy water. I'm like, whoa. Let's not make a Howling 2 mistake and like turn this into like some sort of weird, like, adjacent vampire like lore. There's no need for that. But yeah, but basically the groom's like, no, I'm not leaving without my wife. I'm gonna go back for my wife. I'm not even sure how they get split up, to be honest, when the chaos happened, because they were literally dancing together, I think, when...
I think it's just like there's just like so many people that it's just like all this, you know, like a stampede, and you just, you know, you get a few quick turnarounds and you don't know what's going on. Yeah.
So, I think it's around 10 we actually see where she is. She's actually with another group of characters, in like the I don't know, the security camera room or something like that. It's that kind of area.
This like seemed like a little weird to me, because it felt like this was just kind of like an old church, but then it's like has these like high tech like security rooms. Like it feels like a news office or something, which I guess makes sense if it's like a, you know, if it's a pretty popular place with lots of antiques, you probably have security and stuff. But it just didn't really fit like the aesthetic of like the other areas, I felt like.
Yeah, and obviously she wants to find her husband, and it does this thing here where they both say, because it cuts between them, but both of them kind of say, well, the husband says it first, but he says like, oh, I know she's alive, I can sense her, and I'm like, that's a bit cheesy. And then because they're in the security and communications room, the wife goes on the PA, and that's actually what reveals that she's alive, and she comes over the PA and says, husband, I know you're out there, my love, because I can sense you. And I'm like, all right.
And she mentioned she's pregnant as well.
Oh yeah, she mentions she's pregnant during this scene. You're right. Which was teased to the audience at the start when she was talking to her sister or whatever it was. So yeah, she. So we cut to her, and she's with a priest, presumably the priest who did the wedding, I would imagine, and. Not the Sponge yet. They run into Joe Sponge soon, but he's not with them at first. Like it's after they start moving around, they run into him.
I got a little confused at first because I thought the Sponge guy and the royalties guy actually thought looked like pretty similar. So when we first met the royalty guy, I assumed it was just like the Sponge guy out of the costume.
So did I actually, until he said who he was, and then we run into the Sponge guy later. And it's like, okay, all right, you two guys are different. And apparently, the guy in the Sponge costume wasn't wearing anything underneath it, so he couldn't take the Sponge costume off. Now, I assume he just means that he's in his underwear, and the reason why he's not wearing anything else is because the costume just gets too hot, so that's why.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. But the way he says it, he almost kind of felt like, wait, are you just like kinky, you know, not wearing underwear? You letting the Sponge just caress your genitals there, buddy?
Hey, you never know. I was gonna make a point about something. But
well,
I guess I forgot.
We're waiting.
Oh yeah. I don't know about you, but I was getting like a little bit of like Resident Evil 2 vibes, just in the sense of like, okay, yeah, like we have our two main characters, but they're separated, but then like, yeah, you're getting kind of like bits and pieces of like, each one's story and kind of lining up, and then eventually getting to meet up again. That's the thing that it reminded me of, like, oh yeah, we're doing like the Resident Evil 2 formula of, I mean, I guess technically you could say Resident Evil 1 formula, but I don't know, it sticks out more in my mind as a 2.
Well, the Resident Evil 2 story interacts with each other more, which is why I think you probably think of that. I can kind of see what you're saying. I think maybe the closest it ever really gets to feeling like that, though, is probably when the bride does become a bit more of a badass and tries to, actually fight back a little bit. Because there's not a lot of characters in this who are very capable. They're all just kind of scrambling to live, and obviously they pick up some weapons and hit the zombies with it. But I don't think, I think there's one guy who has like a shotgun, but there's like almost no firearms until the end.
I think it's the Sponge actually.
Yeah, it's the Sponge. Yeah. Because at the end, obviously, there's like the SWAT teams there, and like you see like all that. But for most of the movie, there's like no firearms. It's just weapons that have been found. Luckily, these underground tunnels have a chainsaw and like a log, which honestly, if anything, that makes me think of Silent Hill 2. Because when you unlock the chainsaw in Silent Hill 2, that's where you find it. You find it just kind of in a log at the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, that's very reminiscent of that. Yeah.
I wasn't even really sure what those like tunnels were supposed to be. I was like, all right, I mean, cool. I like an underground tunnel, but
Tim tells me all the time, guys, how much he loves a good underground tunnel.
It's neat. I like it.
Yeah, everyone's favorite part of every video game ever is the sewer level.
I used to, as a kid, we played in sewers. It was like some like small sewers like behind my house that me and my friends went into a couple of times.
I think the phrase negligent parents is springing to mind right now.
Yeah, it's like the kids just ran wild in the 80s and 90s. No one was looking after us.
They may as well had a sign around your neck saying, "Come at me, strangers, kidnappers and deviants." If you can control them, you can have them.
Oh my!
Oh, you'd have been a nightmare as a kid. I can picture little Timmy right now.
No, I was a good kid. Come on.
Yeah, sure.
Get my mom on the podcast. She'll confirm it.
Oh, yeah, she could fill in while you're away on paternity leave.
I'll show you. She sent me some like old, like report cards and stories and stuff I did as a kid. So I can show you my old report cards. Their teachers are pretty complimentary.
Oh yeah. A lot of F's appearing on those report cards, I assume.
No, it's all A's and S's and.
S's? Your schools used the Japanese video game rating system where the S was better than an A?
I think like for like really young grades, like I think like kindergarten or first grade, I think there was like S's.
Oh really? That's
why.
I only know that system from video games. It tends to be Japanese-made games that have like the S as the higher rank than the A.
Yeah.
But well, that's funny. Okay. S for special. Tim's a special boy.
Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with being special. We're all special.
What was a 5% chance he's got a creepy doll fetish, but other than that, he's a special boy. Even then, they could see it. They could see the Brahms loving your eyes. No? Okay. Honestly, the middle of
There's
this...
nothing wrong with loving dolls, all right?
The middle of this movie does kind of blur together for me a little bit, because it's basically just the husband like goes looking for her in his like suit of armor with one other guy who dies relatively quickly. And they're sneaking around, and there is a moment where like he's in the foreground and you can actually see the wife is like sort of climbing down like a rope from a window in the background. It's like, oh, they just missed each other. Like if they just noticed each other, they would have found each other much quicker.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. The wife's story takes her to like she runs into the guy Rafa who's with Natalie, and the joke is that they're not even aware that anything's going on because we're too busy having sex.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. But Natalie dies really quickly. That's the little thing. It brings up. This is one of the things I was talking about, where it sort of introduces like characters and then like sort of tries to give them a little bit of backstory right before they die, so it feels really kind of like a cheap way of trying to make us care. Natalie's a really good example of that, because when they're sneaking around after this, like Natalie and the bride have this moment where she's like, "Oh, I didn't know if you'd come." Natalie's like, "Oh, I wasn't sure if you wanted me here. I got a cheap flight," and so it gives you this hint that they, maybe felt, they had a falling out at some point. Maybe the relationship was strained, but this was like her like showing up to the wedding is kind of like mending the friendship. And then literally the conversations, they've not even taken a step away from the conversation. Like they're still standing at the end of the conversation when a zombie bursts through and bites Natalie, and it's like, oh, she's already dead. Okay. So you tried to make me care about her a little bit, to give her a little bit of character right before she died, because before that she was just boobs in a dress. Because literally at the start of the movie, when the young guy's like filming people, he keeps zooming into boobs because he's young and perverted. I think it's meant to be charming. Oh, he's a young boy. Boys will be boys, but he's. I feel like when the married couple watch this back later, they're going to be like, why is that little creep zooming into all my friends' tits?
Yeah, at the same time, I would like to see a cut of that video. See, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the director's exact intentions, but to me, it almost feels like another kind of like almost kind of breaking the fourth wall kind of joke, like similar to like smashing the camera and stuff, where like there they are trying to do like, oh yeah, see, we're doing this kind of reunion moment to make you care about the character, and then the joke is like, oh no, she's dead a second later, like that was for nothing. But I don't know, because I thought it was kind of funny. Honestly.
I don't know if the tone's quite right for me to take that as a joke, but maybe you're right. Maybe that's what the intention is. If that's the intention, I don't think it quite clicks, and therefore I think it kind of fails in what it's doing. But if that's the intention, then fair enough. At least it's a different critique at that point, at least, than just this is a terrible attempt at making me care. But I mean, I guess I can, because the camera one's definitely like a joke. It's definitely like a breaking the fourth wall kind of moment. That I'm not convinced, but whatever. Yeah, so yeah, I was surprised because there's a moment they get outside here and the bride's kind of like left alone. Like Rafa and like the sponge guy are like, hey, we'll go ahead and make sure it's safe, you stay here. And all I could think was, well, why is here any less dangerous? Like the zombies can like crop out of nowhere. And sure enough, we get this like slow sort of spinning shot around her that reveals a zombie in the distance, and it's like pouring a rain at this point. It's just that really over the top heavy movie rain, and this zombie's her mother, and she's like, "Mother, no!" And the mother comes in and tries to bite her, and just before she gets to her though, Sponge Joe shoots her in the back and saves the bride. But then he basically dies in this. Like, again, it felt like he was set up as a relatively major supporting character that was maybe going to have a bigger bit, and then he just dies in this scene after he saves her, like very quickly. It felt like every character has been thrown away just a little too quick. Like
So ultimately, it is really just about the bride and the groom. Like they are the main characters. Like everyone does, seem to go rather quickly. I guess Rafa, maybe I guess lasts like the longest.
He lasts the longest, but he's not even like he has like a big scene with the bride where they're in the tunnel. It's right after this because they go into the tunnels and they're trying to get away, and she's like, "Hey, I'm not leaving without my bride. I'm not leaving without Clado." Coldo. Yeah, Coldo. I'm not leaving without my beloved husband Coldo. And he's like, look, he's probably dead. If he was alive, he'd have probably given us a sign. Which felt like kind of a bullshit thing. Like, what sort of signs are he going to give? But the movie actually almost like does a wink, wink, nudge, nudge here, where right at this moment, the husband who's sort of like back in the music hall plays their song really loudly, and they hear it in the tunnels, and she's like, you said there'd be a sign, Rafa. There's the sign. I'm going back for my husband. And there's a moment here where you think, oh, is Rafa just going to be like, it's not, it may not be him. We should probably still go. You're like, oh, is he going to be a complete coward? He does actually choose to go back with her after she like grabs a chainsaw and like, cuts her dress so she can run easier.
Very badass.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a couple of cool moments here. I mean, honestly, it's the most fun scene in the whole movie is when they get attacked by zombies here. Rafa obviously gets bit and dies. Obviously, she decapitates him before he turns into a zombie. But the more impressive parts of this scene are right before that when she's fighting the zombies. She zombies through she chainsaws through a zombie's head is what I was trying to say, down the middle, and that looks pretty good. And I think my favorite part of that is that there's another zombie coming for her as she's doing this, and she actually gets the chainsaw stuck in this zombie's head, so she's trying to like lift it out. I thought that was a fun little like mechanical moment of like, okay, this is actually a fun kind of like survival bit.
And I thought it was kind of fun. Like early on, I think she was having a little trouble getting it started, so she just kind of uses like just the bluntness of the chainsaw to kind of like hit him in the head and knock him down, which I thought was kind of funny because like chainsaw is like a pretty heavy thing. Like,
oh sure, yeah,
you hit someone in the head with that, they're probably gonna go down.
Yeah, and then the second thing she does is she actually puts a chainsaw through the zombie's stomach and then sort of lifts it all the way up to get a complete split zombie, which is also very fun. Looks quite cool. My only complaint about this scene is that at one point she does throw like, it's not a roundhouse kick, but it's like a, it's like so let's say you're kicking with your left foot and you sort of like do like a sort of circular motion with it. Basically what I'm saying is it felt like at one point there was a martial arts looking kick, and I'm like, wait a minute, does she know martial arts? Is that what the movie's trying to tell us? It felt like a little bit too, I don't know, like, I don't know. It felt a little bit too like skilled, I guess.
It's a bit of a Mary Sue.
Everything, that's not what I'm trying to say. But everything with the chainsaw felt like she was just like surviving with the skin of her teeth. She was using the chainsaw, but this is by far the most fun the movie ever gets. Is this scene? I think.
Oh yeah, totally. Like I really like this character, and I thought the actress did a really good job. And like, at this point, even if it does like, I mean, I guess don't really know much about the character, but even if it does seem like out of tone now that she's like doing karate and stuff, I'm just like, hell yeah, I'm all for it. Like, be a total badass and just whoop zombie ass. Like, that's entertaining to me.
I don't think I'd have a problem with it. See if she did the kick, and then she started doing more like martial arts stuff, and then throughout the movie it became clear, oh, she's got training or something. That'd be fine. I'd be like, okay, fine. If that's what you're telling me, that's what you're telling me. But she never does anything like that ever again. It's just one moment where she does this little kick, and I'm like, wait a minute, that was a very specific type of kick. But that's whatever. So Rafa, she cuts his head off before he turns into a zombie, sort of ending her fun chainsaw scene. And then they kind of find each other really suddenly, where she's running around the tunnels, and it's kind of, they set this up earlier because he dropped the screwdriver thing down the grate, but he actually just happens to be looking down there, trying to get through the grate when he sees her running past with a chainsaw, and he's like, my love, and she's like, my love, and she she gets the screwdriver, climbs up the ladder, he opens the grating, and this is them reunited. This is them getting to try and run away.
A couple of things that kind of suck about this is that she does have to leave her chainsaw behind when she's getting up, which is really annoying because it's such a cool weapon. I just want to see her throughout the rest of this movie. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but so like at the beginning of the movie, they show that the groom uses like this big sword to cut the cake.
Yes.
And then like later on, he's looking at the sword. So you're basically like thinking like, oh, like that's gonna be his weapon. Like he's gonna pick up the sword and start killing a bunch of zombies with it. But he, unless I don't know, maybe I missed it, but he never actually uses a sword, does he, on the zombies?
Well, not on the zombies. He does use it in a pretty prominent moment with her.
Oh, sure, with with her,
But, yeah.
right. But
I don't think with the zombies, no.
I don't know. It felt like a missed opportunity because like all I kept thinking was like, oh yeah, we got this bride with this chainsaw and this dude with a sword, and like how badass would it be just to see them like just
the
going
movie
ape shit?
would have won so many points for me if like we had like a big scene with both of them with their weapons, like just decapitating zombies and shit, like on their way out. That could have been good fun. It's kind of funny that the sword, like, because you see him get it in the hall before he goes to the kitchen where the grating is. He sort of like picks the sword out of the cake, like it's the sword in the stone, like it's still sitting in the cake.
Yeah.
That was a bit weird. Oh, it also didn't look like a wedding cake, and I know that not every wedding cake has to be that traditional 3-tiered thing with a little bride and groom on top, but it looked more like a birthday cake just because it was that's just a rectangle, simple cake.
Oh, didn't notice.
I don't know. It's not a big thing. I guess what I'm saying is it looked a bit small for all those guests. I guess that's all I'm really getting at. It looked a little bit small. But, cake's nice. I love cake. I'm not complaining. Cake, more cake, please. And movies.
And I think sometimes what they do is like they'll have like maybe just kind of like, the fancy presentational cake that they'll like, have for like the bride and the groom to cut and serve people and stuff. But then like in the back, they have a bunch of extra cake that they might serve to people.
I guess that's what I'm getting at, is they just look like a normal plain rectangle cake, and it didn't look very ceremonial in any way. I guess it just kind of looked a bit basic, but yeah, I'm not judging. Maybe that's what the cake they wanted. Like it's fine. It's fine. So they get outside and it's daylight kind of by this point, effectively. And they're running, actually no, before they get outside, so the reason when they get outside is because they're actually getting attacked by the zombies. They're breaking out of the kitchen. They think they're going to die, and they're basically saying "I love you," thinking they're about to die. And then, like, I don't know if it's like a scheduled thing or the priest has started it, but he starts like as like a sermon starts playing over the tannoy.
Well, because earlier in the movie, like the priest is kind of running away, and he's basically scared, so he just kind of starts reciting a prayer, and when he does that, it stops the zombies dead in their tracks. So the priest kind of figures out like, oh, like, I can stop them with like, prayer or whatever. So he actually goes to like the sound system and he's like reciting that stuff live. Yeah,
which is fine. The other connection to the original movie is that for some reason, I don't know if they ever did this in the previous two, but whenever you see a reflection of one of the zombies in this, you see the like the demonic possessed girl from the first two movies,
which is not. I don't think that's a bad idea, but it just always kind of looked cheesy in this movie.
Yeah, it felt really gimmicky, and it felt kind of like, I don't know, maybe you could have someone have like a hallucination or something where they kind of see it, or maybe the priest, like, because he's a biblical person, like sees the true face of the demon or something like that. I don't know.
Like I don't hate the idea. It just, I don't know. To me, it just didn't. It looked like kind of cheap and cheesy. Like, I don't know if there's a way you could kind of maybe just get like a better angle, or just maybe have it look a bit more dramatic or something, or like you said, like, just a different way of viewing it. That could be cool, but
so it makes
interesting idea though.
Yeah, so it makes all the zombies just kind of stand still, and they're able to kind of just sneak past them, and it's like, okay, all right, so this feels like a get out of jail free card. But when they're outside and their guard's kind of down, one zombie lunges at the bride and bites her hand, and the I wouldn't say twist, but the sort of the revelation here is that this the uncle character, the grandfather, had a hearing aid. He was deaf, so he couldn't hear the prayer, which is kind of funny in that, so the body functions of the host of the zombies still matters when it's like a prayer that's meant to transcend like spirituality and all that. I don't know. It's kind of funny that it matters that he can't hear, when I would assume that all of the body functions of all these zombies is kind of done, but whatever.
Yeah, you'd think so.
It's whatever. So I will say this. I do like this, that she immediately is like, I'm infected, cut off my arm, and he takes his sword and he cuts off her arm, and she's like thanking him and saying, you did good, my love, blah blah. I do
It
kind
took
of
so long though. Like me and my wife were screaming. We were like, "Oh my god!" Like her whole arm is gonna be infected by the time it takes you to cut off the hand.
I know. That said, though, one of the things that I've always heard with zombie movies is that this idea of cutting off a limb that's been bit is theoretically nonsense because of the speed of which blood like flows through your body. That it wouldn't work. So I kind of do like that. There's almost like a twist here where a minute later, when they think they've gotten away with this and she just has to lose her arm, that she starts turning anyway. Like, I kind of appreciated that. Although I will say, her turning anyway and then him carrying her out the now set up quarantine tube, right? That's now there that we recognise from the past 2 movies. He carries her out like a bride, like a husband carrying his bride, right? Officer and a gentleman style. And she's already turned into a zombie, and he kisses her. And she turns while they're kissing and bites out his tongue, and that's when the SWAT team all fires. Is it just me, or does this ending feel really dour compared to kind of the more lighter fun that the movie was going for? It feels like it got really dark at the end and gave you this really sad ending about this couple that have died together.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's totally fair, especially because, again, I did find them likable, so I did want them to survive. So yeah, I would say it is a bit of a bummer ending.
Yeah, because I was all about how when she got bit, because I was like, wait, she was clearly the more likable one of these two. So it's going to suck if she like dies and he gets to live. I'm like, oh come on, the wrong one survived.
She has a baby and everything too.
Oh, she's also pregnant. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a bit of a weird downer of an ending, which is not out of place in a zombie movie per se, but this one's been relatively lighter to me in tone. Even though everyone else has been dying, it still feels lighter. Actually, that's the other sort of like oddly little moment to me is earlier on. So the characters that were in the church hiding that didn't go with the husband back in to look for the wife, he sees on the security camera when he's snooping around later that they tried to like escape on like a bus. But he sees that the zombies get them. So everyone who was in there, including the younger guy who was helping him, presumably, all died kind of off camera. That felt kind of throwaway. It was like, oh, you set up these characters who had survived, and all that happens with them is that they get killed. And you see like a part of it on the security camera, but not much. It felt like it kind of just squandered all of its supporting characters in a really weird way to me. Which is a bit of a shame, but...
Yeah, I mean, maybe if they had like maybe bigger, more bombastic deaths or something, you could kind of look over it a little bit. But like, I didn't mind that scene, but it wasn't like super cool or fun or whatever. It's just them trying to get on the bus and then zombies get into.
Yeah, and he acts kind of like shocked and saddened by it, but most of those characters we only met really in that scene. I mean, I'm sure they were in the background at the wedding, but as far as like actually learning who any of them were, it was just that scene that he was in the church and wanting to go back for his wife. So yeah, I guess like just some of the elements feel a little bit rushed, and they don't maybe utilize some of the characters they've got, and at times it feels a little bit cheesy. That's my big thing with it, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, and then doesn't the like the guards that are patrolling like the outside and stuff, like the people that quarantine it, don't they feel like a lot like looser than the like people from the first 2 movies? 'Cause if I remember correctly, I feel like in the first movies they were like super gung-ho that like you just step even the tiniest bit outside like you're getting shot. Like with this one they're like, don't come outside, and they still walk like right through the tunnel, and they're like, don't do anything, and they even give them a little chance to get outside, and like even when they're like, hey, she's infected, like they still don't do anything right away until after she bites them and stuff.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like they're forgetting just how strict they were in the last movie, just so they could have this dramatic ending. It's just kind of contrived for the sake of the moment that they want. Which I definitely felt the direction being weaker. I know it's a very different format to how the last couple were shot, but it does feel like this one is a lot more on the generic side of like how to shoot a movie. Not that it looks bad per se, it looks fine, but like the first two are so inventive with everything they're doing. You know, the way that the first one's obviously found footage, and the way the second one incorporates the multiple head cameras and then switches to the traditional found footage. Like there's a lot of weird, like, fun mechanical qualities to the way it's shot in the first couple that is part of why the movies work so well. Whereas this one, once it becomes kind of normal, it's like, okay, you're just a normal zombie movie now, so how are you going to separate yourself from all the other zombie movies? And I don't think it ever really does. It has some fun moments, but I don't think it ever, like, sort of, like, says, oh, this is why Rec 3 Genesis is worth seeing over, 100 other zombie movies. It's definitely not the worst. It's definitely not a hard one to watch. It's pleasant enough, and it goes through enough, which is why I'm not going to be too harsh on my rating. But it's definitely more middling compared to the first two, which
sure.
are kind of basically special and then a really great follow-up. And then this is just kind of, it's kind of like a weird spin-off sequel that's just, it's all right. It has some fun moments, but doesn't really amount to much otherwise. So yeah, I guess we're ready to rate if you'd like to take it away.
Yeah, so I don't really disagree with anything you said, but I just think the difference is maybe it doesn't bother me as much, which I do like the first Rec quite a bit. Like it's it's pretty high up there on the list for me, but I guess I don't also really consider it like super sacred enough that I'm gonna be like too judgy on the sequels or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a pretty fun, easy watch. I like the characters, mostly the bride, which which it does feel like it does kind of become her movie, at a certain point. But there's enough fun stuff with her and with the kills and it is like such a quick movie that actually I would say it's hard to maybe go super high and be like, oh my god, I loved it. But I'm like, oh no, that was like a fun watch. I think I also remembered it being kind of bad, so maybe I was coming in from more of a negative place.
Maybe you had low expectations this time.
Yeah, I was like, oh, actually, no, I didn't mind it. But yeah, I mean, like we said though, it's not like doing anything different. It's not like crazy special or anything, so like I can't really give it like a super high score, but I think I'll go about 6.5. I think it's enjoyable. I like the characters. There's some badass moments, there's some funny moments, and then there's some cheap stuff here and there, and then it definitely gets a lot more rough if you compare it to the previous two movies, which were definitely more of a special thing. But I mean, on its own, it's just a pleasant enough, easy watch that I'd recommend it to someone if they like the first Rec or whatever and want to keep going with it. But yeah, the third one's fun enough to watch, but maybe don't have your hopes super high. But
yeah, I think I want to go with a 5.5. To me, it's it's a bit over the line because there is some fun moments and it's not a hard watch by any means. But it doesn't really accomplish much either. Maybe that sounds a little pretentious, but I don't know if I ever really felt all that much into it, and I don't think it ever separates itself from other better zombie movies. It kind of feels like it's definitely better than some other ones that I hate from the last 20 years. Don't get me wrong, but
right,
it doesn't compare to any of the great ones that came out in that time frame. It's not I think you could sit and make an argument between Rec and Train to Busan and like, okay, which one are you siding with? I don't think Rec 3 can be in that conversation. Not that it has to be. You can have just like a fun movie, but it feels like I liked it a little bit more the first time I saw it. I think it's down a little bit in my estimation now. I'm not sure like where I rank it in like zombie movies from the last 20 years if I'm trying to like place it in there. Like, I don't know. I'd have to like sit and think about all the other zombie movies that came out. But
I mean, there's so many movies, but I mean, I just off the top of my head though, I would think like it would be maybe a bit more in the middle, because I do think it is, a lot more watchable than like a lot of the really bad ones that we've seen. But then also like, yeah, it's not going to come anywhere near like classics like yeah, the first Wreck or Train to Busan, or yeah, even if if you go farther back with like Night and Dawn and Day of the Dead and all those stuff, like it's not gonna hold a candle to anything like that.
Yeah, it's better than Peelers.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
The problem is like the 2000s. There was like zombies were so popular for a while that there's such like a glut of like really bad, cheap like zombie movies, like especially ones that were like very gimmicky. Like there's always like Peelers, like the zombie stripper movie, and then
the movie that's coming in my head right now is Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, and I'm trying to remember if I think that's better or worse than this, because it's probably in the same kind of tier from my memory. But again, maybe if I watch it again, I'll be like, no, this is terrible. Doesn't work. But that's the kind of like caliber that I'm thinking in my head right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of zombie movies. The 2000s and early 2010s had a lot of zombie movies. There's no denying that.
I like it better than Maggie.
Sure.
I actually like the idea of Maggie, but I thought it was super boring when I tried to watch it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to just compare it to every zombie movie. I felt like I wanted to try and gauge it and like the perfectly watchable with some fun to be had sort of range, but nothing special.
I would take it over, the 4th season of The Walking Dead.
I mean, if nothing else, it's only 80 minutes long versus any season of The Walking Dead, which is hours and hours and hours long. But okay, there you go. That's Wreck Genesis. That's 3 out of 4 of this franchise done. We'll come back at some point, someday, with the 4th one. Probably sometime next year, I would imagine, if I was to guess right now.
Do we ever do the American ones?
We haven't. So I guess after 4 we could do Quarantine. Was there a Quarantine too?
There was like a straight to like DVD one, which if I'm not mistaken, I believe it takes place on a plane.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, there's
again,
fun,
that was another one that was like on Netflix for a while that I think I tried to watch. I was like, nope.
Well, I suppose when we're done with 4, we can talk about doing Quarantine 1 and 2. But yeah, so 3 out of 4 though, the original franchise, not too shabby. So hopefully you had some fun with our thoughts on this, and let us know what you thought of Wreck Genesis in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notification. Of course, you can get access to the back catalogue of all the bonus episodes on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for $3 per month, or $5 per month if you want access to even more streams as well, which is a monthly show where we talk about all the random horror movies we've been watching. Not for review for the show, but just all the different stuff we've been watching. It's sort of a horror movie catch up. Obviously they're on pause whilst Tim's away on paternity leave, but nice back catalogue to catch up on, and there's obviously bonuses for the other shows that we get from Mail Fuzz movies, such as the Collector's Cut and the Atomic Cinema Experiment. So please do check out those and see if you're interested in all the content. So I will thank our Patreon producers for the month. Tim, I know you're just pretending to be frozen. I'm not buying it. Thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Borno, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. Thank you to you all for supporting us. Thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon, and anyone who shares us out with friends and clicks the likes a lot. And what stuff. Don't sound sarcastic when you say that, Tim. Bad etiquette.
I'm a bad boy.
You just said you were a good boy. You were bringing out your report cards and everything.
Yeah, that was until I got my heart broken. Now I'm the bad boy of podcasting.
Who broke your heart, Tim? Who was it? Tell us. We'll sort them out.
I can't tell you because it was one of the patrons.
Oh no!
Dun dun dun.
I was going to say we can kneecap them, but maybe that's a bit counterproductive. All right, that's what Screws After Midnight. Thank you very much for joining us. I think it's like June by the time you get this episode, maybe July, depending.
Ooh.
So
June gloom.
So
June moon, the enchantress.
It's early February for us, but by the time you're getting this, it's the middle of summer. So enjoy your Rex 3 review. Your thongs.
Yeah, that's what you wear in the summer. I said thummer.
Thummer. I like to listen to thongs on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully you're enjoying summer. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we'll see you next time.